This week's lecture is going to try to tie together some of the ideas of globalization and what I've been calling postglobalism that we've been talking about for the past few weeks into a more coherent definition. It is going to get into some really detailed aspects that I think will be useful for us going forward, but bear in mind it is kind of getting really into kind of the nuts and bolts of some of these things. To understand post-globalism, we first need to briefly review globalism. Globalism, or globalization, refers to the process of increasing interconnectedness and interdependence among countries and peoples through trade, technology, culture, and politics. The late 20th and early 21st centuries were defined by rapid globalization, marked by the liberalization of trade, the rise of multinational corporations, and the spread of digital communication. Post-globalism, on the other hand, can be understood as a response or reaction to the perceived excesses and failures of globalism. The term post-globalism suggests a transition to a new phase where the ideals and practices of globalism are increasingly questioned, revised, or even rejected. Unlike anti-globalism, which outright opposes globalization, post-globalism acknowledges globalization's irreversible impacts, but seeks to address its limitations. One of the defining features of post-globalism is the resurgence of economic protectionism. This is characterized by policies that prioritize national interests over global cooperation. Countries may impose tariffs, restrict foreign investments, or renegotiate trade agreements to favor domestic industries. Examples include Brexit and the America First policies seen in recent years. Post-globalism is also marked by a revival in nationalism and a renewed emphasis on state sovereignty. Many governments and political movements are pushing back against supranational organizations and multilateral agreements, arguing that these undermine national autonomy. This trend is evident in the rise of right-wing populism and the growing skepticism toward institutions like the European Union and the United Nations. Cultural fragmentation is another key aspect of post-globalism. In contrast to globalism's emphasis on cultural exchange and cosmopolitanism, post-globalism often involves a reassertion of local identities and traditions. There is a growing tension between global cultural flows and local cultural preservation, leading to debates over immigration, multiculturalism, and cultural appropriation. In the digital age, post-globalism also manifests in the pursuit of technological sovereignty. Countries are increasingly concerned about data privacy, cybersecurity, and the control of technological infrastructure. The emergence of internet censorship, data localization laws, and the development of national digital platforms are all indicative of this trend. The shift toward post-globalism has significant economic implications. Protectionist policies may lead to trade wars, supply chain disruptions, and shifts in global economic power. While some industries may benefit from protectionism, others could suffer from reduced access to global markets and innovation. Politically, post-globalism is contributing to increased tensions both within and between countries. Nationalist policies can exacerbate ethnic and regional divisions, while conflicts over sovereignty and resources can lead to geopolitical instability. The weakening international cooperation poses challenges for addressing global issues like climate change, pandemics, and migration. Culturally, post-globalism can lead to a rise in xenophobia, cultural isolationism, and clashes between different value systems. However, it can also spark a renewed interest in preserving and revitalizing local cultures. The global versus local debate is increasingly shaping social discourse with implications for everything from education to media to public policy. During the Cold War, Western politicians and theorists began to divide the countries of the world into three categories using a rather rudimentary numeral system. The first world referred to the largely Western democracies allied against the fear of communism. These countries were generally technologically and industrially advanced with relatively high standards of living. The Second World referred to the authoritarian countries generally classified as communist states. These countries were also fairly technologically and industrially advanced, although the authoritarian nature of their governments restricted the standards of living. The Third World referred to countries that were not technologically and industrially advanced enough to be seen as much of a threat to the democratic West. The majority of these countries were located in the Southern Hemisphere. In the years after the Cold War and the collapse of the alliance between many of the Second World countries, the United Nations recognized a need to realign thinking about these divisions, especially given the implication that countries other than those in the First World were somehow lesser. A new classification system dividing the world between these two technologically advanced countries, which are located primarily in the Northern Hemisphere, and those less developed countries, which are located primarily in the Southern Hemisphere. The global North generally refers to the economically developed, industrialized, and wealthier countries, mostly located in the Northern Hemisphere. This includes North America, Western Europe, and parts of Asia, East Asia, including countries like the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, and others. The countries in the global North typically have high levels of industrialization, advanced technological infrastructure, and higher gross domestic product per capita. These countries often hold significant power in international institutions such as the United Nations, World Bank, and International Monetary Fund. Higher life expectancy, better healthcare systems, higher literacy rates, and overall higher standards of living are also common. The global North often drives global economic policies and trends and is a major player in global trade, finance, and innovation. The global South refers to the less economically developed regions, often located in the Southern Hemisphere. This includes Latin America, Africa, and much of Asia, including countries like Brazil, India, Nigeria, and South Africa. The global South is generally characterized by lower levels of industrialization, less technological infrastructure, and lower GDP per capita. These countries often have higher rates of poverty, lower life expectancy, less access to quality health care and education, and higher levels of inequality. The global South countries typically have less influence in international politics and global economic institutions. However, they are increasingly forming coalitions such as BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, to increase their collective bargaining power. Issues such as political instability, corruption, poor governance, and dependency on primary commodities for economic growth are common challenges. The Global South is a key player in global issues such as climate change, sustainable development, and human rights, often advocating for more equitable global policies. The concept of the global North and the global South stems from the colonial and post-colonial periods, where the global North countries were the colonizers and the global South regions were largely colonized. This history of exploitation and unequal development set the stage for the current economic disparities. The divide is not just geographical, but also economic and social. The global North controls a disproportionate share of the world's wealth, resources, and decision-making power, while the global South faces challenges in overcoming historical and systemic disadvantages. The global North-South divide continues to shape global relations. Issues like trade imbalances, debt burdens, climate change, and migration are often discussed in the context of this divide. While globalization has brought some economic growth to parts of the global South, the benefits have not been evenly distributed, and the divide persists. There have been ongoing efforts to address this divide, including international aid, development programs, debt relief initiatives, and calls for fairer trade practices. The Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations are also aimed at addressing inequalities between the global North and the global South. In conclusion, postglobalism represents a significant shift in how we think about the global order. As we move away from the ideals of globalism, we're witnessing a realignment of global power dynamics, particularly between the global North and the global South. The global North, traditionally dominant in shaping international policies, is increasingly focusing on national interests, protectionism, and sovereignty. Meanwhile, the global South, long marginalized in global decision-making, is asserting its voice and advocating for more equitable distribution of resources and power. This realignment poses both challenges and opportunities. While it could lead to greater autonomy and development for the global south, it also risks deepening global divisions and exacerbating conflicts over resources, trade, and technology. Whether post-globalism will pave the way for a more balanced or just global order, or whether it will deepen existing inequalities remains to be seen. Understanding these dynamics will be crucial as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century and beyond.